Welcome back to Kings of Columbus here on the podcast feed. Whether you're watching on YouTube, listening back on podcast, so glad to have you. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Rapid fire texture questions today, Bill. And we have a segment that may be a recurring segment on Kings of Columbus called Jeremiah Smith Crazy Talk. Is that where we are?
Yeah, I think it is where we are. By the way, I want to. Well, I'll save it for when we talk about Jeremiah. I want to know if you saw something on the internet yesterday.
We did this back when you and I worked at Cleveland.com. We leaned in and we did a Tate Martell segment every week that went crazy on the internet. And we talked about Tate Martell's cat, and we talked about the carpeting in his apartment. I don't know what we talked about, but it was like, we got to talk about this guy because everybody is interested in him. And this is just like that, except the player is good.
Yeah, we called it House Martell because we just love trying to get sued by HBO. Apparently, those videos went crazy when we did
crazy.
I think if we did it with Jeremiah, we would find the same result.
Content is king. By the way, I have officially arrived at my Jeremiah Smith comparison, and we're going to do Jeremiah Smith Crazy Talk in the second half because we talked about him a lot on Sunday. And for people who don't want crazy talk about a guy who's played 2 games of college football, we want to talk about other things too. But if you want crazy talk, this is the place, right? Informed, educated, measured crazy talk. That's what we do. But first, we're going to run through a bunch of texter questions. If you want to be a tech subscriber, you can send a text to 614-662-4509. You'll get back a link to sign up. And we'd love to have you. $6 a month, 2-week free trial. See what you think. Info from us, chance to engage with questions and surveys and stuff like that. I want to do this off the top. This is from our guy, Tommy. I've been watching the podcast subscription numbers. I expected a bump when the season kicked off and the content got more urgent and seasonal. There has been a bump, but there is more room for growth. I rarely notice a reminder from the on-screen talent to subscribe. So this is the reminder. So Tommy, thanks for being our guy. Thanks for looking out for us. I get shy about it because I'm just so grateful that anybody's here. I don't want to ask people to do more. But if you would like to subscribe, it would raise our subscriber numbers. That helps. That way you don't miss anything. If you want to give us a thumbs up, that helps. If you want to write a review on Apple Podcast, and I'm not saying it has to be a good review, that helps. So thanks for reminding us to promote ourselves. Wasn't that helpful, Landis?
Oh, that was helpful because we don't do any of that. I think our number's pretty good, but it's you can always be better. You always strive for more.
Always room for growth. Now we just sound like players. And by the way, for anyone who's not watching KOTN, I had about a 23-minute interview with Will Howard on Tuesday's Kings of the North that I thought was pretty interesting. We did talk about some Kansas State stuff because that is a wide-ranging show that covers the entire North. But he broke down the Jeremiah Smith 70-yard touchdown for us in a way that was some inside ball stuff. Talked about Chip Kelly and Ryan Day. Talked about playing snow football in Farmageddon last year. Did you see that interview, Landis? Did you see me talking to the quarterback?
I did. It was really good. I thought he was pretty honest about his K-State kind of career arc, which is fascinating, as you pointed out to him. But I don't know that I really have heard him talk about kind of how he got to Ohio State in such kind of descriptive terms. So it was nice to get some insight from him.
Yeah. So thanks to Will Howard and thanks to Ohio State for getting him for us. We appreciate it. All right. This is from Bill. Given the issues at Notre Dame and Oregon, did Ohio State get the best transfer quarterback? Or do we just have better coaches? So this is a conversation where maybe Ohio State was interested in Riley Leonard, who went to Notre Dame. Maybe Ohio State was interested in Dylan Gabriel. They were. Who went to Oregon. And after 2 weeks, Oregon, mostly because of offensive line issues that we've covered on KOTN, has looked a little clunky, explosive, but not smooth. And Notre Dame lost to a MAC team. So right now, if you're Ohio State, you're like, yeah, we'll take Will. Yeah, take Will. I mean, the way this worked out, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you could probably make that argument right now. And I'll say too, when way back in January, December, when Ohio State was clearly in the market for a transfer quarterback, I was pretty high on Riley Leonard, and I think I was wrong about that. like just clearly there's something missing there with him throwing the ball, and he also might be hurt now. But like if that's the case, then like he's also injury prone. So I think Ohio State ended up with the right guy. You can certainly see a way where this particular Ohio State offense would work with Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, but I think Will Howard is probably a better fit overall for what Chip Kelly would like to do. So yeah, I mean, of those three schools, I would say Ohio State has the best. I'm trying to think like around the rest of the country who might have transfer quarterbacks that are playing better than Will Howard. I can't come up with one off the top of my head. So I think Ohio State can stake that claim.
So the guy that I wanted for Ohio State in the portal was Michael Pratt from Tulane, who went into the NFL draft, was picked in the 7th round by the Packers, got cut, and now is on the Buccaneers practice squad.
Yeah.
So you win some, you lose some.
Well, I think I like Michael Pratt too. I think just because he's not playing in the NFL doesn't mean he couldn't have been a good college quarterback.
It is. I mean, there is a second part of the equation to this, which is like, right. It's just there's the guy, and then there's the place he's going. So there's the person and the system, and like the pairing of that. In recruiting, you really try to do that. Sometimes in the portal, it's like you got to take what's there, and so it maybe has worked out pretty well with how this happened. Now, more Will Howard questions though. This is from Shannon. Does Will Howard have a goofy throwing motion relative to elite throwing quarterbacks? Something looks weird when he throws the ball. I'm not a quarterback analyzer. It's just something I picked up on him after he missed throws to JJ, Jelani Thurman, and the one that went out of bounds. You got a throwing motion breakdown here, Landis?
I'm not probably no more of an expert in quarterback mechanics than you are, but yeah, there's something a little funky there. I think there's maybe an issue with sort of like repeated kind of like consistent mechanics. And Ryan Day actually talked about that on Tuesday. He said when Will misses, I'm paraphrasing. It's like when Will misses, it's often just like footwork has to be a little cleaner. So they're wanting to work on that during this off week that Ohio State has. But yeah, it's a little unorthodox for sure. I definitely felt that watching him at Kansas State after Ohio State landed him. I think he has tightened some things up at Ohio State, but that's probably always going to be a work in progress because you're kind of chiseling away at 12 years of a guy throwing a certain way, going back to when Will wasn't like high school and middle school, I'm guessing. So yeah, it's a little funky. I think I could see that becoming a somewhat major talking point maybe when Will goes off to the NFL, but I don't know that I'm concerned about it, but it's noticeable for sure.
Is this one of these things where if he's coming in as a true freshman, maybe they break down the motion and rebuild it, but when you're getting him for 1 year and you're trying to win the national title, you work with what you got? Yeah,
I think so. But the one thing I will say about Ohio State is like there are teams, there are quarterback trainers that kind of have like a homogenous approach where they just want everyone they work with to throw the exact same way. I don't think Ohio State does that. I think Ohio State will tweak what you find comfortable in a way that makes you more efficient, but maybe not break it down to the studs and like rebuild it in their perfect image kind of thing. But yes, I think if Will was a younger player with more years ahead of him at Ohio State, they would perhaps be a bit more aggressive about retooling that.
Another Will Howard question. This is from Ellie, I believe. How would you rate what you've seen from Will Howard so far relative to your expectations? For me, I think he slightly exceeded my expectations, but I still want to see more downfield throws. I think slight exceeding of expectations would fit my categorization. Maybe moderate exceeding of expectations, because I think all the things I wasn't exactly sure about him, like as a guy who's going to come in and like rally the troops and get the team to, believe in the new quarterback and that kind of thing. And I think he's checked a lot of boxes on that. And I think sort of embracing the moment, like I think there's a lot of foundational things that we're now in the nitpick zone. Whereas, for instance, like you have foundational questions, I think, about Riley Leonard as it pertains to health and throwing the ball and that kind of thing. So I think if we're in the nitpick zone with Will Howard, then I think maybe we're pretty far into exceeding expectations.
Yeah, I would say exceed expectations. I think a lot of the things they're asking him to do are things that I expected. Maybe they're doing more of it, but I figured this is the direction the offense would go with Will at quarterback. When you look at all the run RPO stuff and the read option stuff that they're going to doing and continue to do more, I think. I would think I would agree with you that the thing that has probably surprised me the most, or the thing I just didn't know enough to have a feel for one way or the other, is how he would carry himself, how guys would react to him, how he would, how like his energy on the field would impact the team. And granted, you know, they've played two overmatched MAC opponents, and I think it's easy to play with a little bit of juice when you're playing well against teams like that. It'll be tested more when the games get a little more difficult. But I think even if you look at some of the Kansas State stuff, like go back and watch the Big 12 championship game a couple of years ago, like felt like the team was really feeding off Will when Kansas State won that game. So he's got a little bit of that to him, but just because you have it at one place doesn't mean you're going to have it at the other. But he seems to have done it here pretty well early on. So that's maybe been the biggest surprise for me.
All right, let's get to CJ Hicks. I have a cornucopia of CJ Hicks questions. CJ Hicks is exactly the kind of player that fans have a million questions about, and frankly, I have a million questions about. Right? This is college football at its finest. Leonard, regarding CJ Hicks, does the coaching staff feel as if he still hasn't developed fully from a mental standpoint, which makes him a good option for a speed rushing defensive end? This is John. Is CJ Hicks handling Arvell Reese jumping him as a starter well? Is he a team guy and a solid member of the Brotherhood? This is from Will. I heard Bill talk about this briefly on Sunday. However, what do you think the plan is with CJ Hicks? He seems like he's losing his spot as a linebacker and should be developed like a Micah Parsons-like player. Is there a chance that could happen? If not, I believe he will transfer. That's Will from the 847. And then the money question, our guy, Douglas DeLillo. What are the chances we are treading into CJ Hicks' Baron Browning 2.0 territory? Just doesn't seem like they're willing to use him the way they should to meet his skill set. Woo! I lived on what are they doing with Baron Browning? Like that was my I sustained myself on that. That was my microwave meal for lunch. I got them 3 for $10. You know how sometimes microwave meals are like $4, and then you go to the freezer aisle and they're on sale 3 for $10, and you're like, let's go. Yeah. There's a turkey lasagna that from Lean Cuisine, I believe, that absolutely slaps. I love it. Mishandling Baron Browning was my turkey lasagna for 2 years. But that's because Bill Davis worked in the freezer aisle, right? And so I would go in and I would be like, this is delicious turkey lasagna. And then I would turn to the guy who's stocking it. I'd be like, why do you stock it like this? Why don't you put it over there instead of over here? But now I trust the guy stocking the frozen meals much more. So it makes me think it's not about the player, really. It really is about the coaching. And so if James Laurinaitis and Jim Knowles are making these type of decisions around the linebackers and who's playing where, I trust that much more than I trusted Bill Davis, who just was never a college football coach. So that's my overview as someone who screamed and wrote about misusing Baron Browning for 3 seasons. What do you think?
I think we are not... I forget what the exact wording of the question was. I don't think we're like approaching Baron Browning territory. I think we are 2 feet firmly planted in Baron Browning territory.
You're yelling at the stock guy. You're yelling.
Not necessarily in the sense of they're going to botch this, although I don't have a ton of confidence that they won't. But
why?
Certainly.
Why?
Because I asked about it yesterday. I asked about it on Tuesday. So I asked Ryan Day. I was trying to thread a needle because I'm not asking a Jack question. I'm asking a should CJ Hicks be a defensive end question. Because I think those are 2 distinct things, 2 distinct ideas. So I asked Ryan Day, I said, Arvell, like clearly Arvell is emerging. He played Cody Simon, Sonny Styles, and Arvell Reese all played more than CJ Hicks did with the first team defense against Western Michigan. And I said, like, you guys have talked a lot about how CJ Hicks can help you as a blitzer, how he's pretty good when you just sort of let him cut it loose and get after the quarterback. Has there been any conversation about making him more of a line of scrimmage player or any thought to that? And Ryan Day he said yes, but then he said they really want him at linebacker right now. And the way he couched it was like from a depth perspective, like they have 3, but sometimes they play 3. What if you lose one? Then who do you go to? It wasn't like we want CJ to be a linebacker because we think he's an awesome linebacker. It's like we want CJ to play a linebacker because we feel like we need 4. So maybe if like Gabe Powers ascends to a point where they start to feel really good about him, and he is like the fourth linebacker, then you can perhaps see CJ Hicks kind of creep more towards the defensive end. I asked Jim Knowles the same thing, and his answer was sort of like, yeah, I've always kind of thought CJ Hicks could be a guy who plays on the line of scrimmage. It's always in the back of my mind. And I said, well, what brings it to the front of your mind? And he said, if something were to happen with our defensive ends, like he thinks they have 4 really good defensive ends. Obviously they do, with JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Caden Curry, and Kenyatta Jackson. And now Mitchell Melton is playing a lot as the 5th guy there. So you're talking about throwing like a 6th guy into that mix. Like I get the numbers there, but it was sort of like, the way I read the answers where it was like, yes, we know this is probably what he should do. No, we're not going to do it imminently, but perhaps there's a chance to do it later on in the season, depending on how some other things develop. But I kind of wish they would just move him there now. And it's not even a guarantee that it would look great. I just think we probably have enough evidence now that it's probably not going to work out at linebacker. So why not try it on the defensive line and see what that looks like? You
think it's not going to work out at linebacker for him, like in this system, or you think he's just not a linebacker?
I just think he's not a linebacker. I don't think he sees it and reacts quickly enough to be a linebacker. He's incredibly athletic, but like it's the computation of, here's the play, I recognize the play design, here's where the ball's going, I'm attacking that with speed. And he just plays flat-footed a lot as a linebacker because I think he's taking just like an extra tick to process stuff.
Okay. And you have to be a tick ahead, not a tick behind.
Yes.
True or false, CJ Hicks will lead Illinois in tackles for loss next year?
I could maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't, my name a little higher than Illinois. No offense to Illinois. We'll see. It's we have a conversation a lot about like the jack position, or like playing more multiple fronts kind of stuff. And I don't really want to have it anymore because I'm just like, let's see what happens kind of thing. But yeah. I will say that the roster as currently constructed, and thinking about who Ohio State is going to lose after this year, would invite the opportunity to play CJ Hicks as a defensive end. Because you're going to lose at least 2 of those 4. You could lose more of them. Like if Kenyatta Jackson decides like, I had a pretty good year as a backup, let me go try to make some money in the NFL. Like that's on the table at least, right? Or at the very least, you only have, it would be weird, but even that, like you have only 2 guys returning. Like you want to play more than 2 defensive ends, right? Like there's an opening there for them to do this in the future. I just don't know if there's like enough time to convince CJ Hicks that it's the right course of action, or to convince themselves, like as coaches, that it's the right course of action. So I don't know what to anticipate.
And we always say these are guys' actual lives. We don't just want to play like name that transfer glibly. And I probably did it 2 minutes ago. But it's just the idea of, this is a talented football player who the clock is ticking. And so you as a player owe it to yourself to give yourself an opportunity. And maybe that's here in a way that you just outlined, and maybe it's not. And so it's just hard for fans. And it's one of those, I have a very hard time with letting go of recruiting rankings. But when we're talking about a 3rd-year, 5-star guy that you believe the coaching staff is describing as the 4th linebacker and or the 6th defensive end, it's like, what happened? And I understand that question, which is why we get a bunch of questions about a guy who's not on the first team depth chart right now. So he owes it, and it might not be anything he's done wrong. Like, right? Okay, so you're not James Laurinaitis as a linebacker.
Yeah,
that's fine. You're not Ryan Shazier. That's fine. A lot of people aren't. But now you've got to find the best way, your best chance to succeed. And if Ohio State's the one thing Ohio State is not at the moment is creative up front. Their front 4 is what it is. And when you have and we've seen this before, and I think on the list of like kind of in between guys who kind of fell through a little bit of a crack, I think CJ Hicks in recent history is like pretty high up the list of raw talent. So then you just want it to work out for him. You just want him to at least get a full opportunity to show like what he can and can't do. And he's getting that practice. I mean, right, if he was tearing it up, he'd be starting. But you'd like a guy with this much ability to like maybe really get a run at it. And maybe that has to be somewhere else. All right, let's talk about quarterback beyond Will Howard. This is from Owen. Devin Brown, are we sure he's here for the full playoff run? Should we be giving Julian Sayin more reps in anticipation for the playoff run should the worst happen to Howard? And here's another one. This is Dana. I like the interview with Will Howard. Will Howard seems to be embracing his journey. I'm happy to see Kyle McCord having success at Syracuse. Seems like a better fit. I think they both landed in a good place. Also, speaking of quarterbacks, would you make Julian Sayin quarterback 2 right now? What are the odds that happens? If so, when? We've certainly had this conversation before, Bill. I do think it's interesting. Like, Will Howard transferred from Kansas State or went in the portal. Like, he didn't play in the bowl last year. Kyle McCord didn't play in the bowl last year. I don't think that's where backup quarterbacks will be on a playoff team, though. Right? No. It's not impossible. That's not my expectation. So that, like, would you have that in your head at all as Ohio State? Like, well, what if Devin Brown goes in the portal and isn't here for a playoff run? That would surprise me if any major guy like that did that in college football.
No, I don't think that would happen. I guess the one thing I don't know about the portal and the dynamics of it is using Devin Brown as an example. If Devin Brown enters the transfer portal in December while Ohio State is still on a playoff run, is he allowed to continue playing for Ohio State while having conversations with other teams about where he could possibly go when the season ends? Or if once you're officially in the portal, you're done? I know, like, a lot of teams like kind of cut you off after you enter the portal, but are they allowed to keep you around? I think they're allowed to keep you around if they want to, right?
I don't know. We need to figure that out. We need to get an answer to that but also, right, if your team's still playing, then your portal window extends. So that,
yeah, but I'm just saying, too, like, if you're worried about, like, oh, I know I'm going to transfer, but I'm the backup quarterback at a team that's playing for a national championship. I'm a little worried that by the time the season ends, the 6 teams that might want me might already have their quarterback, kind of thing. So are you allowed to, like, basically do both at the same time?
That's one of those things that, like, that feels like weird vibes, but Tom Herman took the Houston head coaching job and was Ohio State's offensive coordinator for the national championship game. Why should a coach be able to do it and a player can't?
Exactly.
This happens all the time with coaches.
Yeah.
So like it's like, well, how can you be on 2 teams? Kevin Wilson was on 2 teams. Kevin Wilson was coaching Ohio State's offense still and was the head coach at Tulsa.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're allowed to as a player.
All right, that's good.
To officially enter the portal but then stick around until you leave. I'm pretty sure you're allowed to.
We'll get an answer.
I would assume if you're doing that, you can then have contact as if you would be, like, otherwise, like, away from your former team. But anyway, to answer the question, like, no, I don't. Devin Brown is a guy who's had ample opportunity to transfer from this program. I don't think would choose to finally do it while Ohio State is playing for a national championship.
I agree with that. Unless you just got in a place where it was like, for the good of my future, like, I must do that. But I don't think we think that would be the case. In the name of, and otherwise, we're just on alert for Julian Sayin, like, taking over the number 2 job, just generally, right? Are we just not kind of like on alert for that?
Yeah, I don't know if that would ever be confirmed unless it was a worst case scenario where Ohio State had to make a long-term change at starting quarterback.
As we always say, 2 different things. One is the guy who comes in the 3rd quarter when there's an in-game injury, and one is the guy who, when you have a full week to prep, and now there's maybe you've been abducted by, Will Howard's been abducted by aliens for a month. Who's the quarterback then? Absolutely agree with you. Devin Brown could be the backup in-game, and Julian Sayin could be the backup if Will Howard is living on Mars for 3 weeks.
Right, but otherwise, I don't think Ryan Day would ever say publicly who is what, because I don't know that he has to, right?
Because even if he put in Julian Sayin right after Will Howard in a blowout, he could still just say, well, we're just moving guys around and getting them work. He wouldn't necessarily be like, that's not how he would announce to the world that Julian Sayin's now the 2.
Yeah.
And in the name of everybody loves a backup quarterback and everybody loves a young guy, this is dude. Seems like everyone wants to anoint Julian Sayin the backup quarterback already, myself included, and also the probable starting quarterback next year. In fact, we did a whole show about it a week ago. Tavian St. Clair has more size and compares quite well to Dylan Raiola, who is starting as a freshman at Nebraska. What's the chances Tavian comes in and starts as a freshman for Ohio State? So now we are officially, we should make a crazy talk banner for this. We should just have crazy talk. And I'm not saying that the dude is crazy. I'm just saying, like, college football, bro. Man, what are we doing? I love it. This is why we love it. We're simultaneously, is Julian Sayin Arch Manning the greatest quarterback matchup ever? Should Julian Sayin be Ohio State's backup quarterback? Will Julian Sayin be beaten out next year by true freshman Tavian St. Clair? We can have all those conversations, Bill, because it's just ball. But no, Dylan Raiola is playing because Nebraska doesn't have Julian Sayin or Will Howard. Nebraska is in a different place than Ohio State is as a program. It creates awesome opportunity, but like this is no. There's a great plan in place for the way things are lining up if it is Julian Sayin to Tavian St. Clair, which we certainly would bet it would be, but it doesn't involve Tavian St. Clair in winning that job. That's not the plan for any number one major program. Bryce Young sat for a year. Like play in year 2, absolutely might be the plan. Play in year 1, I don't think that's the norm for the top tier of college football for a quarterback, right?
No, but Julian Sayin has 2 years, so you're talking about Tavian St. Clair for sitting for 2 years, not 1 year. So
arch plan.
But but it's not
arch plan.
Yeah, I don't think I'm not going to tell you it's impossible that Tavian St. Clair starts as a true freshman.
You're not think, like give me odds. Okay, if you're, I'm going to say it's impossible.
I think it's less than 10. I think it's less than 10%. It's probably less than 5%, but I don't think it's impossible.
Like straight beats him out. Like comes in and Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are like, we can't keep. We've never seen this before. We can't keep him off the field. Really?
Yeah.
I don't think they do it.
He has all the recruiting bona fides of Julian Sayin. Like that's the same. It's the same thing. He is bigger, stronger, faster. And they want to run the quarterback.
Crazy talk time. Let's do crazy talk on Kings of Columbus. So he's Jeremiah Smith of quarterbacks. If he's Jeremiah Smith of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean he's not that. He's not Vince Young, right? But he's a very highly regarded.
But if you're not, but Vince Young didn't play as a true freshman. I mean, it's just like the list of.
I'm not saying he's going to play as a true freshman. I'm just saying I will never say it's impossible for any incoming 5-star freshman at quarterback to start right away. I think Julian Sayin will start because I think Julian Sayin is a special processor with incredible arm talent. But I think Tavian St. Clair could make it interesting, if only because of his athletic profile for a coaching staff that now seems intent on running the quarterback a little more. And Julian Sayin is a little guy. So like you're talking about offensive preferences. You're going to have to tweak some stuff, I think, if Julian Sayin's your quarterback next year. And that's fine. It'll still be a very good offense. But I think there will be something enticing about Tavian's athletic profile. Probably, I think not as a freshman, but if Julian Sayin is not God's gift to quarterback play in his first year as a starter and Tavian St. Clair is sitting there in year 2, I think that could get interesting then. But like next year, no, I don't think so.
To be clear, Bill Landis is not saying that Tavian St. Clair will be Ohio State's starting quarterback as a true freshman. I am saying that Bill Landis is saying that Tavian St. Clair will be Ohio State's starting quarterback, a true freshman. We just want to make sure we keep that straight. I do think they are going to, I think you make a great point about what they're showing when it comes to quarterback preference. I think, right, there was a time that, I don't know, it's a team does a thing and then you ascribe philosophies to what they happen to be doing. Yeah. So when you develop a quarterback room, you can either have everybody be kind of the same, so that then you have a style, you have a system, you have a playbook, and boom, boom, boom. One guy gets abducted by aliens. One guy doesn't play quite as well as expected. And when you put the next guy in, it's all the same. Or you could have 2 different types of quarterbacks. And so if this style's not quite working, now you can go to a different style. So what is better? I don't know. Most of these guys just recruit the best players available. And like they wanted to recruit the same style, but that guy committed somewhere else. So they got a quarterback with a different style. I do think this about Ohio State going forward. There's the CJ Stroud version, but if they're going to go with the CJ Stroud version, you better be CJ Stroud. If you're not going to run, and I know Ryan Day wanted CJ to run, and I know he ran against Georgia, but that's still that's not the first thing. It is process, accuracy, arm talent, brain like a computer. That they're in on that. And that's what Julian Sayin would be if Julian Sayin hits, right?
Yep.
But if you are not first-round talent, NFL Rookie of the Year, Heisman candidate level at that, then they want Will Howard, Tavian St. Clair. So that just all that does.
I would say,
go ahead.
I wouldn't say Will Howard. I would say Justin Fields for Tavian.
Justin Fields.
Yeah.
No, but Will Howard would be, if you're putting Will Howard in a box, is he in the Tavian St. Clair, Justin Fields box or the Julian Sayin, CJ Stroud box?
The Tavian St. Clair Fields box of like, just like dual threat, physical. Yeah.
Doesn't have to throw it great necessarily, throw it well, but then be able to do this other stuff. And the problem with Kyle McCord, who's throwing for 400 yards a game at Syracuse, is that he was in the CJ Stroud, Julian Sayin box, but wasn't quite at that level. And then Ryan Day was like, we're out. It doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback, but I think because I maybe once they sort of got this CJ Stroud, I maybe thought like that's what he wants to, like he just wants an NFL quarterback from now on. But then I think he went far enough down sort of the all NFL quarterback style of play that he then realized, oh, yeah, I do really like that. But boy, there's not much margin for error there. Maybe let me get a dude who can throw it, but also has a physical profile where if you don't put every throw in a tight window, we can still win games because you'll do some stuff with your legs.
Yeah, which I actually think also describes Aaron Olin to an extent. And maybe doesn't necessarily describe Julian Sayin completely, although he can move. Like if you watch him in high school, like he can scoot a little bit. He's not going to run people over, but he can use his feet. So I don't think that dynamic goes away entirely if you pick Julian Sayin as your quarterback.
Do you like? I like sometimes to tell you what I title questions because we gather them and then we put them in a list and we title them up. This question is titled, "Is Lincoln Kienholz Taysom Hill?" This is from Andrew. Is Lincoln Kienholz an NFL quarterback? If no, is Lincoln Kienholz an NFL athlete? If no to both, then let him free in the offseason with no regrets. If only yes to athlete, is it time to try and convert him to safety, starting with a conversation? I know these things rarely work out, Andrew says. So I don't know about safety, but if he's a guy who can throw it, but also could be like an H-back, could you convert Lincoln Kienholz into G. Scott?
I think you probably could. I think Lincoln's athletic enough for it, but I think that there are a lot of teams in college football that would love to have him as a quarterback. So I think you would just go do that if Ohio State ever broached that topic with him.
Do you want to be a safety? No. I'd rather be the quarterback at Minnesota.
Like Lincoln Kienholz should be Iowa's starting quarterback next year.
Yeah. PJ Fleck would come to Columbus. No, actually, they have Drake Lindsay. Iowa would come get him. Yeah, that'd be it. We could do that segment. Where should and this is
Dude,
and this is not,
maybe Syracuse will double dip again.
I mean, we're not being glib. It's just that there's not a path for Lincoln Kienholz right now. It's just like stuff happens around you. There's not a path.
Yeah, I don't see a path, and he's super athletic. He is Ohio State's most athletic quarterback, I think, hands down. It's not close. He is a little unrefined, I think, as a passer because he was a 3-sport athlete. He didn't hyper focus on playing quarterback. He's only been here for a year, so he's got some development to do. It's quite possible he's not even ready to start next year in his third year of college football, but he's got 4 years left. So he can play somewhere. I just don't know that's going to be here.
And it's just one of those things. I mean, again, there were some people who got very excited about Lincoln Kienholz. I think you have to be realistic about stuff. It's like, is that guy who was a Washington commit he's from Idaho, right? Like that.
South
Dakota. Great athlete, but like that guy's really going to be the starting quarterback at Ohio State. I think people got a little out over their skis on Lincoln Kienholz. Like they're just always going to be looking for like the next guy. Like there's just, and like that you need so many things to happen. Like if Nick Saban hadn't retired and Will Howard, like, I mean, there are things, but if Nick Saban hadn't retired and Julian Sayin wasn't here and Will Howard was a 1-year answer and we were looking at next year with like maybe Devin Brown again, maybe Aaron Noland, true freshman Tavian St. Clair, then maybe Lincoln Kienholz, maybe he's in that conversation, right? Maybe, but I think we'd still be maybe betting on that. Now we're betting on true freshman Tavian St. Clair, or we're betting on 2nd-year Aaron Noland. So I think some people got a little. I think the Kienholz hive got a little hot at times.
But he can dunk and he hits home runs, man. I get it.
Yeah, no, I get it.
He is like I don't like he like what he can do as an athlete is pretty crazy. Just got to be better throwing the ball.
Yeah. All right, this is Jordan. The pride of Northern ball. It's early, but it's beginning to feel like the Buckeyes are the last line of defense to keep the title up north. I'd like to hear your perspective on some of the stronger Northern teams and who you project as beginning to play better and insert themselves in the fight to defend the Northern title here. Let's go a little bit further down this line. This is Jonathan. After watching Michigan and Oregon and Ohio State the first two games, what are your thoughts on Ohio State's defensive line versus their O-line? I know it's early, but it really feels like both of those teams are in for a world of hurt when they play us. And then a third one dealing with Oregon and Michigan. Do Marcus Freeman, Dan Lanning, and Mike Norvell all fit into this category of college football head coaches I keep thinking about? Young guys not known to be quarterback developers, trying to make it big, hoping the transfer portal will let them, quote, fake it till they make it, but turning out to be frauds instead. Dan Lanning hasn't had the embarrassing loss yet, and recruiting seems to be going well, but I'm on high alert for fraudulent activity. That's from Derek. So this is a way to talk about, we don't need to talk about Florida State too much, but it's a way to talk about some of these teams up north. I do think, right, who are the other Northern contenders coming into this season beyond Ohio State? Oregon, Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, Utah, Kansas State, right? Those are the biggest ones. 2 weeks in, it does feel like, do you agree that like it's on Ohio State's plate? There are people out in the world who picked Oregon to win the Big Ten, who picked Oregon to win the national title. If I was a person who had made that pick, I would not feel great about it right now. And the person asking about the offensive line battle, that's primarily because of Oregon's offensive line, as we covered on KOTN on Monday.
Yeah.
First of all, is Ohio State like kind of standing alone in defending the pride of the North as it stands now?
Yeah, I probably mostly alone. I have a decent amount of belief in Oregon still. If Oregon can get its offensive line stuff figured out, and I think maybe I'll be wrong. I like these words. I still like Penn State, even though they played a bit of a clunker against Bowling Green. So
yeah,
yes, but like not totally alone, but certainly at the top of the list by a decent.
What do you think about Ohio State against Michigan's offensive line and Oregon's offensive line? What Tyleek and Ty and Jack and JT might be able to do against them?
Yeah, I think those are favorable matchups right now for Ohio State. I think of Oregon and I think of where the liabilities are on Oregon's offensive line, and it's on the interior, I think. So you like Tyleek Williams there, you like Ty Hamilton there. I think like Caden McDonald has popped a little bit through the first two games, and if you can give them a third guy who's reliable, you start to feel really good about that. So I think Ohio State's I guess the way I would say it is Ohio State's defensive line is definitely ahead of where Oregon's offensive line and Michigan's offensive lines are right now. I think both of those offensive lines will probably get a little better, Oregon in particular, once they get some guys healthy. But even then, I don't think the ceilings of those offensive lines is higher than the ceiling of Ohio State's defensive line. So I think that will always be an edge for Ohio State.
And then this is an interesting head coach discussion. There certainly was a time where I felt like, man, you really want your head coach to be an offensive guru and a quarterback developer. That's who I would want to hire. I felt like then maybe we shifted away from that a little bit. But when you think, I mean, the texter brings up a good question with Norvell, Lanning, and Freeman, because Notre Dame, last 2 years, Sam Hartman, Riley Leonard, both transfers. Oregon, the last 3 years, Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, both transfers. Florida State, Jordan Travis transferred after his freshman year, but he was actually at Florida State for a long time. But then they have nobody in the pipeline. They have Brock Glenn, who was one time dancing around with Ohio State. And they go get DJ Uiagalelei, who you maybe should have seen enough at Clemson to realize that's not the guy. Would you still want a quarterback developer as your head coach? And again, we have to remember, we did this on KOTN. Only 8 of 28 Northern teams started a homegrown quarterback in week 1. We cannot pretend like getting a portal quarterback is a weird thing. And Ohio State started a portal quarterback too. But is that still is Ohio State in better shape because their head coach's expertise is in quarterbacks?
Yeah, probably. I don't know that I would have answered yes to that question a couple years ago, but if the thought process is you're going to be bringing in new transfer quarterbacks, you need to expedite their developmental process. The best way to do that probably is to have your head coach be a pretty solid quarterback developer himself. I guess I understand that idea. I don't I don't know. I don't think it's like wrong to hire like a defensive head coach. Like I don't think anyone's pretending like Dan Lanning is a quarterback developer. Dan Lanning just needs to hire a good offensive coordinator and a good quarterbacks coach, right? So I think anybody could do that as long as you hire the right people. But I guess if I had to choose one, I'd probably choose an offensive minded head coach. Although, who's won national championships? Like more often than not, it's been defensive. I mean, and Nick Saban kind of
throws everything off.
Yeah, but even like Kirby Smart's a defensive guy, right? I like Jim Harbaugh, I guess, is a quarterback guy. So, yeah, I guess it makes sense to have more of a quarterback guy than not.
The main thing is, I think for major college programs, you've got to get off the quarterback transfer carousel at some point. So that's why your room matters. So when you see Notre Dame and they have CJ Carr as a true freshman, who I think they really like, who is the future starter, okay. When you see Oregon has Dante Moore in there, who was committed to Oregon, then went to UCLA as a freshman last year and played, now is back at Oregon and feels like the next guy in line after Dylan Gabriel. Okay, you have a plan there, and that's kind of like a homegrown guy. That Ohio State had to get Will Howard for a year, but you have a plan. I think if you're a mid-tier team and you're living in the portal because you just can't recruit quarterbacks as good as portal guys out of high school, I get it. You can't live there as an elite team. So Florida State got stuck in between after losing Jordan Travis. I'll accept anybody for a year having to go in the portal. Stuff happens at quarterback. If you're lining guys up, if Notre Dame is not starting CJ Carr next year, now I think we have a real discussion point. Like, what are you doing if they go and get another random ACC quarterback of the week to be their starting quarterback? So you've got to have a plan.
I'm just looking because I agree with you. You gotta have a plan, and I think you need to get off that carousel as fast as you can. But just looking at the quarterbacks from like this most recent recruiting class, like DJ Lagway didn't go to a quarterback head coach. Dylan Raiola didn't go to a quarterback head coach. Julian Sayin didn't go to a quarterback head coach. CJ Carr did not. Ethan Grunkmeyer did not. Jaden Davis, I guess, did, but now he's not playing for one. Yeah, so I don't know. Like Jackson Arnold didn't.
Just
trying to think of someone. So I don't know. Like I guess like logically it makes sense. Like, oh, if you have a quarterback guy as a head coach, you're more likely to land a big time quarterback recruit. Like I don't know if that's like true anymore with the NIL stuff.
Yeah. This is a quick one from Scott. Doug, I promise I'm enjoying this team because you've got to like your team. I appreciate that Scott is like preemptive me yelling at him. But my question is, what are its biggest areas of weakness? Where does this team need to improve to set itself apart from the other national title contenders? I want to be able to focus on watching those areas so I can look for the improvements. Is this continuing to be an offensive line question, or is there somewhere else, Landis?
I think it's probably mostly an offensive line question. Yeah. Just continuing to kind of develop game to game, especially with the run game kind of being more on point. And it was against Western Michigan. So you just want to see that continue to build. Yeah, I don't know where you'd look otherwise, to be honest. Linebacker, maybe, because there's just still a lot of new there. Even if I'm really excited about Arvell Reese, and I know everyone else is. He's a true sophomore who's playing linebacker for the first time. So you got to keep an eye on that. Sonny Styles is playing linebacker for the first time. So you got to keep an eye on that. But secondary, I have no questions. Defensive line, I don't really have any questions. Don't really have any questions about offensive skill. It's it's offensive line, and I guess Will Howard's ability to make the plays you need him to make when you're playing really good defenses, which obviously we won't know until they actually face one, but they won't face one in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So yeah, we'll know beginning of October.
I mean, that other part of that, when we had like that Michigan-Oregon sort of line conversation, the other side of that is Oregon's defensive line, especially on the interior, is quite good. Bunch of transfers in there. I'm very curious about Oregon's defensive tackles against the interior of Ohio State's offensive line. And then obviously that same equation applies to Michigan, who have the best pair of defensive tackles in the country in Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. But when you think about, it's like, who could mess up Ohio State's season? I think the top of the list is Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant at Michigan, and Jamari Caldwell, Derek Harmon, Mateo Uiagalelei at Oregon, those kind of guys, because I think they are getting after it, and Donovan Jackson needs to get back healthy, but the interior of Ohio State's offensive line, I'm not saying they can't do it, but I think I'm really curious to see those matchups.
Yeah. I mean, I I agree with you, but I would say that's true of the whole offensive line. Like you want to make sure like can Josh Fryer hold up in these matchup games, kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
like that's still an unknown commodity as well. It's really all offensive line for me. But yeah, I think Seth McLaughlin's played really well through 2 games. Donovan Jackson should be back against Marshall and be able to ramp up to Iowa. And I think Tegra's been fine in his 2 starts so far. But that is probably the stress point of the offensive line is the middle.
And I do think sometimes, like, especially in the Big Ten, for all the things the Big Ten does not have at times, they've had runs here in certain years of really good edge guys, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about Chop Robinson at Penn State's going to be a problem. We've had a lot of conversations like that. But I think the conversation more for Ohio State's schedule, at least this year, is interior defensive line. Now we'll get to Abdul Carter and deny Dennis Sutton and guys like that when they play Penn State. But like, there's some really good defensive tackles that Ohio State has to play.
Yeah, I might actually say more like right side of the line than interior. I don't know that I have many concerns about center and left guard.
Okay. Donovan has to get healthy. All right,
as long as Donovan's healthy. Yeah.
Let's get to crazy time. It's crazy time. I think this could be like we want this to be like a children's morning cartoon show. Was it still a thing when you were a kid? You woke up on Saturday morning and watched cartoons live on TV, or was everything on streaming when you were a kid?
No, yeah, I was watching TV when I was a kid. Yeah.
What was better than that?
Nothing. Yeah.
I do think that's the most comparable thing to people getting excited about college football Saturdays is the feeling you felt when you were a kid. You were excited to wake up on Saturday morning because you wanted to watch cartoons because they were on then and you didn't want to record them and you had to watch them live. And it really meant something. Like, I have to watch this right now. And live sports is the only thing that is still like that. And I think the thing most equivalent to Saturday morning cartoons 20 and 30 and 40 years ago is college football right now. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I also had, when I was a kid, when I was in grade school, we got to go home for lunch. Like my school was around the corner, like literally around the corner. I walked down to the end of my block. I made a right. I walked another block and I was at my school. So we got to go home for lunch if we wanted to. So that was always a big deal for me, is like going home and being able to lock in on some Scooby-Doo from like 12 to 12:45 while I sat there with my TV tray and ate my ham and cheese. And it was the old Scooby-Doo episodes where like the Harlem Globetrotters were on there. They were great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Philly style, man. Growing up in Philly is just a different world. My God. They're just like, get out of here. Go eat a cheesesteak. We'll see you in an hour. Yeah. 9-year-old.
That's basically what it was.
Philly style. All right. Jeremiah Smith, it's crazy time. This is Michael. After 2 regular season games, is it crazy to think that Jeremiah Smith could be a Biletnikoff finalist? Okay. If you think that was crazy, wait for this. This is Zach. Why not start Jeremiah Smith's Heisman campaign now? Make him the first guy in the modern era to pull an Archie. Win this year, voters are idiots and tired of him next year. Then he wins again in his 3rd year. Let's do more. This is the Fong. What are the 5 greatest true freshman seasons in college football history, and how many will Jeremiah Smith surpass? Okay. I have officially arrived at my Jeremiah Smith freshman year comparison based on a smidge of research forced by these questions. Are you ready for me to reveal it?
Please.
2004 Adrian Peterson, who was the #1 recruit in the country, who rushed for 1,925 yards and 15 touchdowns, who was a first-team All-American as a true freshman, and who finished 2nd in the Heisman voting to Matt Leinart and thinks he still should have won, and who led his team to an undefeated regular season and the national championship game, and looked like an NFL player when he was 18. So when we think about this question, how crazy could it get? Trevor Lawrence was awesome as a freshman, right? Led as a freshman quarterback, led Clemson to the national title. You know who was great as a true freshman? Maurice Clarett.
Yep.
Maurice Clarett led his team to a national title as a true freshman. I think in any kind of modern era, and sometimes you look this stuff up and there's red shirts in there, it's not the same thing. I'm talking true freshmen. I think those are the 3 names to me that jump to mind. But I think when you talk impact, physical ability, and what he could mean to a team, that is not, I was not thinking Adrian Peterson in the preseason, but if you're that's where I am now. And then it's like, what could Jeremiah Smith be as a true freshman? finish second in the Heisman and the driving force of a team that plays for a national title. Okay.
Yeah.
Does that sound crazy to anybody right now? Jeremiah Smith is Adrian Peterson.
I like it. I think it makes sense. Right. And I think like Adrian Peterson, when he was a freshman, was like, I don't know if you caught this in like watching what you were able to rewatch of the Western Michigan game, but like Jake Butt was talking about how like this is the kind of guy you got to change the draft rules for. And when TV analysts say like anything during a game, I just always assume that they are parroting something they heard from the coaching staff during the week. So I think that there are probably people in the Woody who think that about Jeremiah. So if that's the case, then yeah, I think we're in this kind of territory with him. It's a little, the dynamics aren't the same, right? Because it's easier to get the running back the ball. But I think in terms of impact as a true freshman and sort of like notoriety in the sport, yeah, I think that's where we are with Jeremiah.
So it's one of these things. It's like we're calling it Jeremiah Smith Crazy Talk, brought to you by what the hell is that? But it's not crazy. Like what can we say? Texans are asking about what's the Heisman case? Could he win the Biletnikoff? It's like, yeah, of course he could win the Biletnikoff award. I'm not sure what we could say that would be crazy anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Makes
I guess
me feel
like
better.
that he's like already the best receiver Ohio State's ever had, or the best receiver in college football history, or something like that. That'd be pretty crazy, I guess. But
so we talked.
By the way,
the
thing I wanted to say. So friends of the program, Ari Wasserman and Andy Staples, were in town, and they had a sit down with Ryan Day for their podcast. And during their interview with Ryan Day, Ari said to him, "We were at dinner with Bill Landis on Sunday, and he said Jeremiah is better than Marvin already." Is that crazy? And like they said that to Ryan Day on their show instead of owning it themselves because they agreed with me.
What did Ryan Day say?
He said it's okay for you guys to say that. I can't say that, but he didn't say no.
Okay,
he said I can't say that.
So Ari is like we do a whole show on an idea. We put it out into the world. You take the idea to dinner.
Yeah.
You present the idea at dinner. Andy and Ari take in the idea, and then they take it to the head coach. But when they take it to the head coach, in case it's too crazy, they put it on you.
Yes.
Did you feel like they were properly giving credit to you, or are they trying to hide behind you? Be like, Landis said it. I mean, we're not saying we said it. We just Landis said it. I don't know. You know how Landis is.
Yeah, I think it was the latter. Yeah.
What is up? Wow.
They're using me as a meat shield for their Jeremiah Smith takes.
But after the Tuesday interviews, Ryan Day didn't say, "Hey, Bill, can I see you in my office?"
No, he didn't say that.
Okay.
No.
You didn't get called into the principal's office? No. All right. So at least we're getting credit for creating this discussion. And we didn't just create a discussion, we created a poll. If you could have either freshman Jeremiah Smith or fourth-year Marvin Harrison Jr. for just this season for this Ohio State team, who would you take? And this is the parameters I'm trying to create. It's the question we asked on our Sunday Sound Off. It's our post-game show that we're going to do on Sundays now for Ohio State. And it's like right now, it's just either Marv could have stayed or you get Jeremiah now. And it's not about 2025 at all. It's about Marv, who he is, if he had stayed, just like all the other guys stayed, or Jeremiah, who he is right now. That's the only question. This team right now, who would you take? The official results. Do you know who won the poll? Do you want me to tell you, or do you want to guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll guess that Marvin won, but it was a very slim margin.
Okay. You are underestimating the craziness of our viewers and listeners here on Kings of Columbus. 50. Oh, no, wait. I did read it backwards. Sorry. I actually thought they voted for Jeremiah. 54-46, Marv. You are exactly correct. You are exactly correct. In my head, I wanted them to pick Jeremiah and make myself feel better.
But even that is crazy. Like that 54%.
54-46.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, Marv had one catch for 4 yards in his debut in the NFL.
Yeah, people were dogging him a little bit after his.
Would Jeremiah Smith have gone 1 for 4 in his NFL debut? I'm not like that's not what we're doing. Marvin Harrison is a tremendous football player, but let me read. Let me read a little of this. Wait, I pulled up. I had a bunch of. answers to that I pulled out of all the people talking about Marv, and now I cannot find them. Let me look. I made a whole folder and everything. Let me look one more time. Huh. All right. You know what we're going to do? Mike, let's take a quick break. I got to find my crazy Marv answers, my crazy Jeremiah answers. When we come back, you will find out, did Doug find the 20 responses that he gathered, or did he accidentally delete them? And then we'll also do a couple more rapid fire questions. All of that next on Kings of Columbus. All right, back on Kings of Columbus, I found them. I also found a text called KOTN sword names. So we were asking on KOTN what we should name our swords when I got all fired up that you said Texas had a sword named Texcalibur, and somebody sent in 2 awesome KOTN sword names. But that's not what we're doing right now. That's a different Crazy Talk conversation. This is the Jeremiah Smith Crazy Talk conversation. So when people who voted 54% for Marv, 46% for Jeremiah, Jacob said, I voted Jeremiah, looking at it as a season-long decision. I would rather have Marv for today just because of the experience factor, but by the time Michigan comes to town, I think Smith is an easy pick. I also turned some of the profits from the KOTN betting show into a $5 bet on Jeremiah to win the Heisman at 90-1. Call me crazy, but that dude's a stud. What do you think of that bet?
It's a great bet. Yeah. If I were allowed to bet, I might throw a $1 or $2 on Jeremiah.
Yeah. Well, also, by the way, we are winning bets on Bets of the North. If you guys want to catch it every Friday morning on the KOTN feed. This is Alex. I think Smith adds an element, taking the top off in a way that Marv didn't. Maybe I haven't seen it yet, but it's there. I think that is an interesting point. Trying to keep this short, I'm taking talent with experience every time. There are 2 different types of receiver. JJ has a higher ceiling from what I've seen, but Marvin's played hundreds more collegiate snaps and watched a lot more college film, thousands of more reps, not taking anything away from Smith and his work ethic. I'm just taking the experience with someone as talented as Marvin. That's Donald. That is probably a very mature and grown-up response, is it not?
Yeah, that's like that's the Malcolm Gladwell approach, the 10,000 hours. You want that guy. Yeah.
It's very mature and responsible, and I'm going to say boo. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to boo somebody for being like, Marvin Harrison Jr. is very good. What is wrong with you people? We will accept that as an answer. This is Arj Sarge, our guy. Marv saved last year. We are 9-3 without him. That said, JJ's out here breaking records. If this is his peak, Marv is better. If JJ learns and grows, hoo boy, we're talking top 5 college football receiver ever. Is that wrong?
No, that is
not wrong.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Jared in Van Wert. I'm taking Marv. I don't think Smith is far behind, but I can't help but wonder if Marv would have looked even better with Will Howard running the offense and the addition of Chip Kelly. I think that is valid, but also we have to remember Marv also had a season catching passes from CJ, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too. I think when you remember this conversation, that's peak Marv. Is it not? Like Marv with CJ.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, Marv was excellent last year with dealing with some quarterback inaccuracies, but yeah, peak Marv was 2 years ago.
Yeah. Ben says he'd take Marv. And also he says, I love this new generation of football nerds at Ohio State. Marv and JJ are both like me, getting good at Pokemon cards when I was a kid, but instead of monster cards, they stay up late dreaming of catching balls. So I like that Ben is the Jeremiah Smith, Marvin Harrison Jr. of Pokemon cards.
Yeah, good for him.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah.
John says, and this is probably the whole point, a tougher question to answer than I would have thought 2 weeks ago. That's really the whole point. We wound up in basically a coin flip. The point is, Marv was everything you want. And 2 weeks in, we're saying, that's the point.
Yeah. And I can sense in every response from someone who picked Marv, I can hear it. I can hear that you wanted to pick Jeremiah. And I get why you didn't. It's not wrong, but I can hear it. I can hear it. It's on your heart. You wanted to pick Jeremiah.
And can you hear this from the people who did pick Jeremiah, like our guy Luke? I voted for JJ and I feel insane.
Yes, of course. Yeah, because I feel insane.
Yeah, like I'm an optimist and expected JJ to be great after the effusive praise he's gotten this offseason, but I'm still blown away by his immediate demonstration of his dominant skill. I feel insane to have voted him over Marv. That's our guy Luke. Luke always gets it. Brandon, I love Marv, but I'm taking JJ, and I don't think it's close. With JJ, he's already a more polished route runner, gets better separation, and much better run blocker. There's someone else who talked about the blocking. This is Shane pulling us back from the edge. Marvin Harrison, come on now, LOL.
Fair response.
This is Rusty. This is Rusty, because when I sent out to the texters, I said, I feel like a crazy person even asking this. And Rusty responded, you are completely insane. And I agree with you. And I agree with you. So like he says I'm insane, and then he voted for JJ. I can't believe I just voted for JJ. How is that possible? Zach in Dallas. I'm so excited to see JJ's career play out. So far, all the hype is extremely warranted, but I've got to go with Marv. Luke, responsible. I picked JJ for the poll, but I think that is 100% recency bias and how crazy he has been through the first 2 games and how different Marv looked last year with McCord throwing the ball instead of Howard. That's Ian. That's a good point.
Yeah, great.
I just like making our viewers feel crazy. I take Jeremiah Smith, and the only reason is because of blocking. This is Jonathan. What do you think of this? I give Marv the edge in football IQ, but barely, and Jeremiah is noticeably better at blocking, in my opinion. I love Marv, and other people said this. I love Marv, but I think Jeremiah has more of a dog mentality when it comes to blocking. So this idea, I think Marv is like the ultimate technician. I think people who voted for JJ see a similar level of technical proficiency and dedication, although I think nobody can be quite at Marv's level, but they see more dog in Jeremiah Smith. And so I think they think great technical proficiency and work ethic, more dog. Marv, awesome technical proficiency and work ethic, maybe not quite as much dog. As a simplistic breakdown, I think that might be a decent way of saying it.
I think I think that's right. I guess maybe the thing I would say back to that is I think it's easier, I think, to have that mentality when you're a freshman and a little harder to maintain as you get closer to the NFL money. So
I think that's right.
Yeah. So and it's not to say that JJ will lose that. But I think that's true of any player, any player that is as good as we're talking about. Like, a lot of the dirty work, you start making some business decisions sometimes, which I don't like. Whatever, you're about to be a bazillionaire, I get it, but I think for right now, it's a fair comparison, and I think a feather in JJ's cap that he is a pretty good or willing and physical blocker.
And this is Rick. Got to be JJ. He's just a phenom. He's a natural phenom. I think Marv worked more at his craft. Which is, again, and it's one of those things, again, I mean, there's a part of, Marv wasn't the #1 recruit in the country. Jeremiah was. And that's not the end all be all, but Marv exceeded, talk about exceeding expectations. Marv exceeded expectations. He wasn't even the best receiver in his own class based on just like raw natural ability. And then he got here and worked like we've seen nobody work before. And by the way, he is also super fast and also super talented. But just like absolute, like if we couldn't even ask the question freshman Marv versus freshman JJ, because that's a ridiculous, that's 100-1 for Smith. Yeah. 100-0. What we're asking is freshman Jeremiah versus senior Marv. And so it's okay to feel crazy. Football, I think it's okay to feel crazy about college football if you know you're crazy.
Yes. I agree.
Because crazy's fun. And this should be fun. And I think if the crazy is directed the right way, we're here. Let us absorb your crazy. That's maybe the #1 reason why we're here. It's like, oh, who you texting? It's like, oh man, I got some crazy thoughts. They're deep, dark thoughts. Don't tell anybody. Your partner's like, what are you doing over there? It's like, I don't want to talk about it. What are you doing? What are you doing? I'm texting. I'm saying that I think Jeremiah Smith is better than Marvin Harrison Jr. Just don't tell anybody. I'm going to go in the closet. And text this. Dear Doug and Bill, please, I can't tell anyone else this. Let us be your football therapist. Your crazy thoughts. I think, are you in favor? Listen, we like to mix it up here on Kings of Columbus. And we are going to do a Kings of Columbus Sunday sound off every Sunday as our post-game show whenever there's a game. Is there a sound off this Sunday with no game?
We are not sounding off on Sunday with no game. No.
That's good, because I'm going to be driving back from Wisconsin. So it's better for me if there's no sound off. Do we want to do Jeremiah Smith Crazy Talk as a segment every week on Kings of Columbus?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
I think either on Sunday or Wednesday, we can mix it up. Yeah.
Or both. It's okay. We want you to be crazy in a functional, positive way. This is all positive crazy. So when we have Jeremiah Smith Crazy Talk time, you can send us your thoughts. We will share them. We'll share our thoughts. And we know. But this is a safe space. Now back to football. See, how easy was that? Now back to normal talk, including naming our swords. No, we're not naming our swords today. That's a KOTN problem. Biggest offensive addition. I feel like, what are we doing here? Hey, Doug, what do you think has been the biggest offensive addition so far? Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith, Quinshon Judkins, or Chip Kelly? Or Seth McLaughlin? This is Kyle. I don't know. I'm going to say the guy that we just said is the greatest player in college football history. I'll say him. What do you say? Did you say Seth McLaughlin?
I guess if we can we remove JJ from the conversation?
We can.
I would say Chip is number 1 and Seth McLaughlin is number 2.
Ahead of the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
We're not having this conversation today. Like, do you think there's a world where with Chip, with a veteran center, Kyle McCord staying here would have looked different and everybody would be feeling good about it? Or do you still think we're not? No, I don't know if that, maybe that's not productive. Kyle McCord Crazy Talk might not be productive.
Well, no, I would say no. I don't think Kyle can do the stuff with his feet that he needs to do, that you have to do in this offense. Yeah. All
right. Super rapid fire now. This is Brian. You're the head coach of Ohio State and need to choose between the following combination to make the Natty run. Who do you pick? CJ Stroud and Marv, Will Howard and Jeremiah. I think the idea that CJ Stroud has wound up being not a national championship quarterback at Ohio State will be a thing that people look back on maybe 50 years from now and be like, what? And then you'll bring in a little bit of Connor Stallions. You'll bring in a little bit of like Ryan Day was really carrying a big load. You'll bring in a little bit of like Michigan was really good. You'll bring in a little bit of like it was only a 4-team playoff era. One loss could kill you. And then you'll say, wow. As potentially you're thinking about CJ Stroud as one of the best players to ever play the quarterback position. Yeah. So I would take CJ and Marv in that comparison.
I would take CJ and Marv too. I think I would understand the argument for like more of a dual threat QB and a receiver who is probably just as good. But CJ is special, so I'll take special.
This is our guy Howard. Our guy Howard in Charlotte, who admits he's crazy, and we love it. This is a weird thought that I think brings into question just how spoiled OSU fans are, or maybe just me, and here it is. I'm glad that Dylan Raiola isn't a Buckeye. With such a pedigree, recruiting ranking, and now some on-field production, I feel that's definitely crazy to say, but watching the way he imitates Patrick Mahomes is super cringy. It's too much. It's weird. I feel bad for Patrick Mahomes. Like, what do you do? I know I'm crazy for saying that. Yell at me and tell me, but I can't stop thinking about it. So, listen, we've talked about Dylan Raiola a lot on Kings of the North, justifiably so. And we've talked about the idea that Kobe Bryant copied Michael Jordan and it was fine. And Kobe Bryant was copied a legend and then was also great on his own. So I don't have any problem with it. Do you think, Bill, if part of this conversation from Howard is like fitting that into the overarching machine that is Ohio State football, Nebraska needs a pick-me-up. Nebraska needs, I think, a focal point. And for Nebraska to be like, hey, Nebraska's freshman quarterback is kind of like Patrick Mahomes. It's kind of like crazy and cool and good. And Nebraska's like, wow, people are talking about us. We need energy. Great. I could see where if that was happening at Ohio State, because there's so much other good, and they're trying to beat Michigan, and all right, like, he wouldn't be starting as a freshman here, that it maybe would go over a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. And I'm not like blaming Dylan Raiola for any of this, but I think as this worked out, maybe him being in the spotlight at a program that hasn't been in the spotlight might be a perfect fit.
Yeah, I think he just kind of fits in better there. I don't know. I do think that would be received quite differently, both externally, but also internally at a program that has a lot of veteran returning, very serious people who are trying to go check off a lot of boxes and win a national championship and beat Michigan and win a Big Ten title and win every game they're playing. Like, I don't think they'd have much time for Patrick Mahomes cosplay, which is what Dylan Raiola is doing. Yeah.
And also he's a very good quarterback. So
he is a good quarterback. Fine. I do think the Mahomes stuff is kind of strange. They have a close like personal relationship too. Like, I get it. And listen, if you're going to be a quarterback and you want to emulate somebody, there are far worse choices than Patrick Mahomes, but you maybe like bring it back a skosh.
When he committed to Ohio State, I absolutely know I did a podcast that was like, wow, they got Dylan Raiola. This guy's kind of looks like Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And I did not say Ohio State just got the #1 quarterback recruit in the country. He looks like Patrick Mahomes and kind of acts like Patrick Mahomes, and it's cringy. That's not where I was at all. I was like, whoa! It made you feel crazy for like, you don't want to put that on a 17-year-old kid, but otherwise it was like, hey, it's kind of cool. So, I mean, I don't know that Ohio State fans would think it's cringy if he was a Buckeye.
But
I think
no,
it could
probably
be weird.
not. Probably
could be
not.
weird could be weird in the building, to your point.
Yeah.
Could be weird in the building. This is Larry. Why do you think JT is underappreciated? Tuimoloau. Seems a lot of Ohio State media is saying he is off to an underwhelming start. He has 1.5 sacks in week 1 and is disruptive in ways that don't show up on the stat sheet. I just don't get it. What do you think?
I haven't picked up on people thinking he's off to a rough start. I think that there was an expectation that JT was going to become Chase Young. And I think a point you've made several times is he's actually kind of more like Cam Hayward. So it's just like a different style of defensive lineman. So I think expectations have been skewed a little bit because of that. But I think JT has been very good for Ohio State. And I think, I don't know. I guess I don't know that I've picked up on people thinking contrary to that very much. But I do think there will, because of like how much of a deal his recruitment was and where he was ranked, that there was like, oh, here comes the next one. And it's like, no, he's a different kind of player.
He's not a super twitchy pass rusher. He is a really smart, athletic football player. And I think like the Penn State game 2 years ago, like almost did him a disservice because people went nuts for that game and it was really good, but it wasn't like the 4-sack Chase Young Wisconsin game. And like, it was hard to say it at the time. And I definitely remember thinking it and I held back on it because it's like, what are you going to do? Criticize a guy for a huge game against Penn State? But he was like swatting balls in the air and dropping in coverage and making plays. He wasn't just destroying offensive tackles and getting to the quarterback all game. He was like making versatile, athletic football plays, but he is not a tackle destroying pass rusher. He's just not. And I think
he is sometimes he is, but it's not like, it's not snap the snap like Chase Young.
Yeah. So like, it's just, I think he's been misinterpreted for much of his career. And and at this point, if there are people saying like he's off the rough start, as you said, I haven't heard that either. It's because you are expecting him to be something that he's clearly not. And then that's more about us or whoever's saying it and less about him.
Yeah. We
had a big conversation on KOTN on Tuesday with Dan Wetzel about Travis Hunter and his Heisman chances as a two-way player. This is Will. Half of Ohio State's roster could play both ways on Colorado, but they don't because it wouldn't be smart. Emeka was a great safety prospect. He could 100% do that against the vast majority of Ohio State's schedule as a starting safety. Steel Chambers could have played running back and linebacker. Lorenzo Styles was a wide receiver at Notre Dame. Many Ohio State people could play both ways on a bottom-tier Big 12 team, but it would be silly. So that feels like, Will, like I don't know that anybody should be mad for praise of Travis Hunter. And I don't think we should underestimate what playing 133 snaps a game at a high level on both sides does. But there's something in there, Bill. Like, Will's... It's not easy, and not everybody could do it. But there's something in there to what Will's saying.
Yeah, I think so. I find what Travis Hunter does to be incredibly impressive because he also does it at altitude, and playing in Boulder, which like just further complicates things. I think he would be doing a version of this no matter where he was. Like if he had just followed through with his Florida State commitment, I think he would be a two-way player at Florida State. And it's not merely that he's a two-way player. Because, like, you're right, like, Emeka Egbuka could probably play safety. I don't think Emeka Egbuka would be, like, a top 10 safety in the country. Travis Hunter is very good at cornerback and receiver, to the point where people could envision him playing either in the NFL. So I think it's a slightly different conversation. He gets a lot of praise, I get it, and he gets a lot of praise on a Colorado team that rubs a lot of people the wrong way and, frankly, isn't very good and probably deserving of a lot of the attention that it gets. But I think Travis Hunter as an individual is.
Like a Steel Chambers comparison to Travis Hunter is just like is not where we're at.
No.
And
Steel Chambers played linebacker because he wasn't a good enough running back, right? That's not like,
Yeah. Last two. I pulled more. We can't get to them all. Love the rapid fire. This is our guy, Shelby. Why would Ross Bjork divulge the $20 million NIL number during the ESPN interview? I think it was actually Yahoo. Even if it was in response to a question, to me, it shows clouded judgment and clearly is something Ryan Day is sensitive about based off his comments at Tuesday's presser. I'm perplexed. Am I alone in my critique, Shelby? You are not alone in your critique. NIL is a very weird world where on one hand, I think administratively, you want to show how competitive you are and what a good job everybody is doing. But from a football standpoint, the idea that you bought your roster and now that adds pressure or somehow it proves that like you know, came in the back door. It's like, oh, they just bought their roster kind of thing does not help the football. So this is one of those where I do think you need like your administration and your football building to be in lockstep. And I do think, right? I mean, Gene Smith was around here for 20 years. Ross Bjork just got here. I understood from an administrative standpoint of why Bjork said that. I'm not sure and again, like we're in favor of guys saying all kinds of stuff. I mean, like as long as it's true, we want the information. What a great piece of information, right? Like the best thing that I like got information about was like whatever it was 3 years ago when I was at the summer thing and Ryan Day said 13 mil then publicly and nobody else was there. That was my little story for a day. So like we love all of that. I'm glad Ross said it. I don't know that the football building loves that Ross said it. And I think they just need to work that up. But isn't it a weird thing, Bill? Because like you kind of want to brag about it, but you also kind of don't want to put it as a burden on your football program.
Yeah, you want to brag about it too because of the perceptions that were out there about Ohio State not being organized enough to be as competitive as it needs to be from an NIL standpoint. So I get wanting to be like, well, check this out. We had a $20 million payroll this year. It doesn't do the football program any favors. I also think the football program is a little too sensitive about it. This is the game. This is what the college football is now. You should be proud that you're good at it. Like this is how you build a roster. I don't care what it costs. You're trying to win a national championship. Georgia spends a ton of money. Alabama spends a ton of money. Oregon spends a ton of money. I don't think they're sensitive about it. So just build your roster. It costs what it costs. Go win a championship, and who cares what people say about you? You know you won because you have good football players. That's all that matters. So like I understand. Like it's a different I don't know. It's a different way to think about things that I think people are still getting comfortable with.
Yeah.
Like, and I just speak for myself. Like, if and when Ohio State wins a national championship, I will not think to myself, well, that team just bought a national championship. I think maybe because we're still early on in this, that might be the initial reaction, and I get the pushback to it. But I don't think Ohio State needs to be sensitive to it because it's just the new world, and just as it was in the old world, Ohio State's pretty good in the new world too.
Yeah, the Yankees aren't afraid of being the Yankees. It is what it is. Last one, last two from our guy Ben. What happens if Quinshawn or Travion get on a roll in a game? If the defense is getting destroyed by one, does the other guy kind of sit? Do you have a feel for that, or do you think they'll just continue to roll them through every game?
No, I think we'll see more of a hot hand situation develop. Okay. It'll depend on the game too. Like if Quinshawn, for example, is like super hot, but Ohio State's up by 4 touchdowns, I think they'll probably still roll the guys. If Quinshawn or Travion, whatever, flip it. If Travion's running really well against Oregon, but it's a tight game, you probably stick with Travion a little more. I think the state of the game will determine some of that, but I think there will be times where we see a scenario develop where they ride the guy who seems to have a little more rhythm that day.
And last funny football question. You'll like this one, Landis. Also from Ben. Why doesn't some FCF school just try a 7-foot tight end?
Oh. Yeah, I don't know. I would think
it has to be the right kind of 7-footer, because if it's a Victor Wembanyama 7-footer, he's going to get snapped in half, right? Kevin Durant will get snapped in half. It has to be like a Yao Ming 7-footer. Like who's a big, sturdy, like, Boban or whatever, that guy who's on all the commercials, like that guy.
Yeah.
Get a guy like that who's got some size to him and then just like throw him jump balls. I'd try it. I'd try 2 quarterbacks. I'd try everything. I'd try never punting, right? Let's try everything. But also, I don't know if you see a 7-foot, 340-pound guy just walking through your campus, get him on your football team. I think that's a good idea. That's like generally speaking, do that. And there's a guy at BYU this year who I think was a Utah power forward who transferred to BYU to play tight end. There are we've seen this before. Antonio Gates, right? Like we've seen it. Antonio Gates is this question, except he wasn't 7 feet tall. He was 6'8". So
we've seen like the 6'8", like 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" kind of. I think there's a guy at Penn State, Ross Travis. I think was a basketball player who tried to play football and then didn't. I don't think it worked out, and now he hangs out with Travis Kelce and he's in Taylor Swift's suite. But yeah, it's happened before, but never quite. Never with a guy. I think it was over 7 feet tall. I'd watch it.
You know what would have been good? You know, would have been good at this because they had like Ricky Dudley. Like, what are we talking about? Like the idea of like take a big, tall basketball player and make him a tight end. We're there.
Yeah,
just I didn't think Greg Oden would have done. I was thinking of Dallas Lauderdale. Super long wingspan for Dallas Lauderdale. Oh, yeah. Dallas Lauderdale was like 6'9.5", maybe, but he had like a 7'6" wingspan. Jump balls to Dallas Lauderdale.
Yeah,
sturdy. I'm there. All right, we have more. We couldn't get to them all. I'll save them. Somebody wanted advice for the Ohio State-Nebraska game. We got time to give advice on that. So we have them. We'll save them. We'll catch you every Wednesday here on Kings of Columbus, Monday through Thursday, live, noon, YouTube, Kings of the North, Friday morning betting show, Saturday night post-game, 11 p.m. I will be at Bama at Wisconsin on Saturday. And so we'll be talking about that one post-game. And, you know, I mean, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, you care about Ohio State, you care about trying to tell Bama to cram it. Don't you? Mm-hmm. Doesn't everybody? Would there be a person here? How could a person watch this and be like, I'm kind of rooting for Bama?
No way. Not against Luke Fickell.
No, yeah. Luke Fickell. Yeah. That's a good, like for Ohio State to have an off week. It's like, what am I going to watch? You're going to watch Luke Fickell at big noon, trying to tell Bama to cram it. That's as close as you can get to an Ohio State football game without it being an Ohio State football game. So I will be there. We'll have a report from there. We'll have a post-game discussion that centers on that, along with all the other best Northern games, Purdue, Notre Dame, Boston College, Missouri. So if you haven't joined us on the post-game show at 11 p.m., and the weeks that Ohio State plays an interesting, important game, Ohio State's going to be all over that post-game show at 11 p.m. So I know maybe if you joined us for the Ohio State post-game show right after the games last year and you missed that, when it really matters for Ohio State, we're going to be talking about them at 11 p.m. on Saturday. And now we're always talking about them like at noon on Sunday. So we still want to serve that audience, Bill, right? The best we can. Mm-hmm. We're super busy, but we do not want to abandon our core people.
No, and I've liked the Sunday show the last 2 weeks. I don't think it makes sense to try to do one when there's not a game, but every Sunday we'll have, like I said before, we'll have a show there. I think sometimes it'll be both. We're going to try to make it the two of us as often as we can, but I think sometimes it might be a solo show, but it's never really a solo show because it's us hanging out with the Texans.
Look at that. Look at that. It's all about friends. Okay. That's right. Thanks to our producer, Mike Yorstowski, for making us look good and sound good. We'll catch you guys on KOTN. For now, he is Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of Columbus.